On Labor Day weekend, 3 days before my 33rd birthday, I arrived home from a 14-hour flight from Geneva and discovered that my sister had legally erased me from my own life. By the time the sun set that evening, exactly 6 cardboard boxes containing everything I owned were sitting on the lawn of my $5 million Malibu home. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I smiled. And if you've ever had a family member smile at the exact moment they should be breaking down, then you already know something terrible is about to happen. Before I continue, tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. And if you've ever dealt with toxic relatives who believed your success belonged to them, hit like and subscribe. Because what happened next destroyed my entire family in ways they never saw coming. My name is Claire Harrison. I'm 33 years old, and I'm a forensic accountant, which means my entire career revolves around watching arrogant criminals believe they're smarter than the system, until they realize they aren't. That afternoon, I rolled my suitcase up the steep driveway toward my house overlooking the Pacific. The Malibu breeze carried eucalyptus and salt air, the same scent that always meant I was finally home after another international audit. 2 weeks in Switzerland reviewing corporate fraud for a pharmaceutical conglomerate had drained every ounce of energy from my body. All I wanted was a shower, a glass of wine, and silence. Instead, I found 6 cardboard boxes sitting beside the sprinkler heads on my perfectly manicured lawn. Cheap boxes, the kind you get for free behind grocery stores. I knew immediately they weren't mine, because everything inside my house had been professionally packed when I moved in 2 years earlier. I reached the front door. My custom brass key slid into the lock. It didn't turn. I tried again. Nothing. The entire lock had been replaced. For a few seconds, I just stood there, suitcase in hand, staring at the unfamiliar lock in my own door. Then I noticed the note taped to the top box. The handwriting was unmistakable. Rachel's, my older sister. It read, "We're doing this because we love you. Please get help." That was the moment I smiled, because if you work in forensic accounting long enough, you learn something important about criminals. The ones who believe they're morally justified are always the sloppiest. I set my suitcase down and opened the first box. Inside were my winter coats, my diplomas, my personal journals, and my grandmother's urn, just tossed in beside a pair of muddy sneakers. For a moment, the ocean breeze stopped feeling peaceful, but my mind stayed perfectly calm, because numbers had already told me this day would come. Let me ask you something. If you came home and found your family had locked you out of your own house, what would you do? Would you call the police? Would you start screaming? Or would you do exactly what I did? I picked up the urn and placed it gently inside my leather tote. Then I called Rachel. She answered on the second ring. "Oh, Claire," she sighed dramatically. "I see you found the boxes. Why can't I get into my house?" "You need to stay calm," she replied, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Mom and Dad are really worried about you." I looked at the new lock again. "Rachel?" "Yes?" "Why can't I get into my house?" She sighed again. "You've been spiraling, Claire, traveling constantly, isolating yourself from family. Andre and I had to step in." Andre, her husband. A self-proclaimed entrepreneur with a talent for losing money faster than anyone I'd ever met. "We took over management of the property," she continued. "For your own good. You changed the locks. You signed the paperwork last month," she said. The silence between us was heavy. "You signed a quitclaim deed transferring the house to us," Rachel continued sweetly. "Mom and Dad witnessed it. Everything's notarized." A quitclaim deed. For those who don't know real estate law, that's the fastest way to transfer property ownership in the United States. No sale required. No payment required. Just a signature. Except I hadn't signed anything. Rachel lowered her voice. "Please don't embarrass yourself by making a scene. The neighbors are already watching." Then she hung up. A moment later, the front door opened. Andre stepped out wearing a maroon velvet blazer like he was attending a fashion show. Behind him stood 2 Malibu police officers. Andre smiled. "Officers, this is exactly what I warned you about," he said smoothly. "My sister-in-law, Claire." The older officer looked tired. "Ma'am, we received a call about a trespasser. I handed him my ID without saying a word. He studied it, then glanced at Andre. "Sir, provided documentation showing he now owns the property." Andre held up a manila folder. Inside was a notarized quitclaim deed. My signature sat at the bottom. "Forged," the officer sighed. "Ma'am, if you believe the document is fraudulent, that's a civil matter. But right now, he's the legal occupant." Andre gave me a sympathetic smile. "You should really seek treatment, Claire." Treatment. Mental breakdown. Concerned family intervention. It was actually a clever angle. If they framed me as unstable, any protest I made would look like proof. But Andre didn't realize something. My job involves dissecting financial lies for a living. I looked directly at the officer. "Can I ask one question?" "Sure." I turned to Andre. "When I supposedly signed that deed, what color pen did I use?" Andre didn't hesitate. "Black ballpoint." I smiled wider. "Thank you." Andre frowned. "Why does that matter?" Because there was one tiny detail he didn't know about me. A habit developed after years of analyzing forged signatures. I never sign legal documents with black ink. Ever. Only midnight blue. Custom ink cartridges. Impossible to replicate on a scanner. But that wasn't even the real trap. It was just the first crack. Andre leaned closer. "You're bluffing." "Maybe," I said. Then I picked up my suitcase and walked down the driveway. The officers watched me leave. Andre watched me go. And I could practically hear his brain turning as doubt started creeping in. But the ink color wasn't what would destroy him. It was something buried deep inside the property records, something Andre had just inherited without realizing it. I drove away from Malibu, but I wasn't heading to a hotel. I was heading to the only place more toxic than my sister's marriage, my parents' house in Calabasas. And when I walked into their backyard barbecue 20 minutes later, I realized the betrayal went far deeper than a stolen house. Because hanging above their patio was a banner that read, "Congratulations, Rachel and Andre, on the new Malibu estate." But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what my father said next. And it would become the first piece of evidence that destroyed them all. At exactly 6:18 p.m. that same evening, I walked through the side gate of my parents' backyard and realized something that took me 33 years to fully understand. My family had never seen me as a daughter. They saw me as an investment account. If you've ever been the responsible one in a toxic family, you probably know the role: the quiet achiever, the problem solver, the one who pays the bills while everyone else celebrates. Tell me honestly in the comments, were you ever the responsible child while someone else was always the favorite? Because in my family, that favorite was Rachel. And judging from the banner hanging above the patio, she was celebrating again. The backyard was glowing with golden evening light. Jazz music played from a Bluetooth speaker. My father, Thomas Harrison, stood at the grill, flipping thick steaks like he was hosting a country club dinner. My mother, Susan, poured champagne into crystal glasses. Rachel sat on the outdoor sofa, with one hand resting on her stomach, laughing loudly. A decorative banner stretched across the patio. "Congratulations, Andre and Rachel, on the new Malibu estate." The moment Rachel saw me, her laughter stopped. The champagne glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the stone patio. My mother turned around slowly. Her eyes narrowed immediately. "What are you doing here?" Her tone wasn't surprised. It was annoyed, like I had interrupted something important. "I just wanted to see the celebration," I said calmly. "Steaks, champagne, a banner for the house you stole from me." My father set down his spatula. My mother walked straight toward me. "You listen to me," Susan snapped. "You've embarrassed this family enough today." "By coming home to my own property?" "You've been unstable for months," she said. "Rachel and Andre stepped in because someone had to." I looked at Rachel. She didn't say a word, just watched. Then my mother slapped me. Hard. The crack echoed across the patio. My head snapped to the side. For a moment, nobody moved. Rachel covered her mouth with both hands like she was witnessing something tragic. My father didn't react at all. He just stared, approving. I slowly turned back to face my mother. The sting on my cheek was hot, but the emotion inside me wasn't anger. It was clarity. "Did you just hit me?" I asked quietly. "You deserved it," she snapped. "For what?" "For disrespecting your sister. Rachel is pregnant. She needs stability. You're never even home. That house was wasted on you." There it was, the justification, the logic they had been rehearsing. "You're telling me," I said slowly, "that because I built a career and Rachel married a bankrupt entrepreneur, my assets now belong to her?" My mother leaned closer. "You owe this family." "Owe." That word again. I heard it my entire childhood. You owe us. For raising you. For feeding you. For letting you live here. I looked at Rachel again. She finally spoke. "Claire, you're twisting everything." "Am I?" "You've been traveling constantly, working all the time. That house just sits empty. Andre and I can actually build a future there." Andre and I. The two people currently drowning in debt. I stepped toward her. "Rachel, I highly recommend you don't unpack your bags." She frowned. "What does that mean?" Before I could answer, my father spoke. His voice had the same authoritative tone he used when I was 10 years old. "Enough." Thomas Harrison stepped forward. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and still carried himself like the senior banking executive he had been for 40 years. "You are making a massive mistake," he said. "By questioning fraud? By challenging your family." I crossed my arms. "You forged my signature." "No, we didn't." "You changed the locks on my house." "You signed the deed." "I did not." My father scoffed. "You think you're smarter than everyone because you crunch numbers for corporations." Crunch numbers. That's what he thought I did. "Let me explain something," he continued. "I spent 4 decades as a senior loan officer. I understand property transfers better than you ever will." I tilted my head. "Really?" "Yes. So explain something to me. What? Why did you need a notary to stamp a document I never signed?" The silence that followed was brief, but it was enough. Because my father answered, and he shouldn't have. "I called in a favor," he said. My mother looked at him sharply, but he kept going. "An old colleague of mine is a certified notary. He knows our family. He understood the situation." My heartbeat slowed, because that sentence was everything. That was conspiracy, and he just admitted it. "You're confessing," I said quietly. "I'm explaining. You coerced a notary to falsify a legal document." My father's face darkened. "It's not fraud when it's family." I wish I could tell you that sentence shocked me, but it didn't. Because that had always been their philosophy. Family means entitlement. Family means access. Family means taking whatever they want. "Rachel needed help," he continued. "Andre is building something big, and you were sitting on $5 million doing nothing with it. Nothing. Working 80-hour weeks, building my career, buying my own property. To them, that was nothing." I looked directly at my father. "Do you remember my college trust fund?" He blinked. "Of course. Grandpa left $80,000 for my education. That was family money. You drained it. That was for Rachel's wedding." My voice stayed calm. "You stole my college fund to pay for a 200-guest wedding." Rachel shifted uncomfortably. My father shrugged. "You were always smart. You figured it out." And I did. Student loans, 3 jobs, 4 years of grinding exhaustion. While Rachel honeymooned in Bora Bora, paid for by the same trust fund meant for my tuition. "You owe us," my father said again. "You took everything we gave you and built a career." I laughed, not loudly, just enough to make him uncomfortable. "You didn't give me anything," I said. My father's face hardened. "You ungrateful little... You took my education fund. You forged my signature. You stole my home." "And it's legal," he snapped. "Your notary friend stamped the document. That makes it official." I nodded slowly. "So the notary stamped a deed without the signer present?" "Yes." "And you arranged it?" Yes, my mother suddenly whispered. Thomas, stop talking. But it was too late, because the more he spoke, the more evidence he created. I turned toward the gate. I'm glad you're confident about the legality. Where do you think you're going? My father demanded. Home. You don't have one. I stopped at the gate. Then I looked back at him. You might want to tell Rachel not to redecorate yet. Why? Because the federal government tends to take a very dim view of notarized fraud. My mother scoffed. Stop being dramatic. My father folded his arms. You think a lawyer can undo this? No. Then stop threatening us. I smiled again, that same calm smile. Dad, I said softly, this isn't a lawyer problem. What does that mean? It means you've just confessed to a federal crime. The silence was suffocating. Rachel looked confused. My mother looked irritated, but my father looked uneasy, because somewhere in the back of his mind, he realized something. He had just admitted everything, out loud, in front of witnesses, and I had heard every word. But even that confession wasn't the real trap. The real trap had already been triggered. Because while we were arguing in his backyard, Andre was inside my house, sitting at my desk, using a forged deed, trying to borrow $4 million. And he had no idea my house carried a secret that would destroy him. Not just financially, but federally. And I was about to watch him do it in real time. 23 minutes after I left my parents' house that night, I was sitting inside my car in the middle of a rainstorm, preparing to watch my brother-in-law commit a federal felony. The rain had started suddenly over Calabasas, thick drops slamming against the windshield, like someone dumping gravel onto the glass. I didn't start the engine. Instead, I opened my laptop. If you've ever wondered how white-collar crimes actually get proven in court, here's a question for you. What matters more, the lie someone tells, or the evidence that proves they told it? Because that night, I was about to collect both. My name is Claire Harrison, and one thing about forensic accountants is we prepare for the moment when someone tries to steal from us. 2 years earlier, when I bought my Malibu house, I installed something most homeowners never even consider: hidden cameras. Not the cheap home security ones you see advertised online. Mine were embedded directly into the crown molding, smoke detectors, and HVAC vents. 6 cameras, high definition, audio-enabled, running on a private cellular network completely separate from the house internet. Nobody could disable them without ripping open the walls, including my family. I logged into the system. The screen loaded slowly. Then 6 video feeds appeared. My living room, kitchen, hallway, master bedroom, garage, home office. I maximized the office feed. Andre was sitting in my chair, my leather executive chair. His feet were resting on my desk, and in his hand was a glass of my 18-year-old scotch. He looked excited, nervous, but mostly excited. That's the thing about desperate people. They start celebrating before they've actually won. He held his phone to his ear. Yes, that's correct, Andre was saying. The property is fully paid off. I leaned closer to the screen. The estimated appraisal is $5.2 million, he continued. I'm looking to pull $4 million in a cash-out refinance. $4 million? He was saying it casually, like it was pocket change. The loan officer on the other end must have asked a question. Andre laughed. Of course we have documentation. It was a family transfer. He held up the forged quitclaim deed, notarized and everything. I sat back in my seat. There it was, Stage 1. For those of you watching, here's something most people don't realize. Federal wire fraud begins the moment someone sends fraudulent documents electronically across state lines. Andre was currently doing that. The bank he had called was located in New York. He was sitting in California, and he was about to upload a forged legal document, which meant the moment he clicked send, it became a federal crime. But here's the twist. The bank didn't approve the loan immediately because banks have fraud detection systems, and Andre's application triggered one instantly. I saw it on my laptop. Because the second half of my job involves something most people never imagine: backdoor access. When you investigate multinational financial crimes, you get clearance to view banking systems most civilians never see. I opened a secure network, entered my credentials, and accessed the bank's underwriting queue. Andre's application was sitting there, flagged yellow. The system had detected a problem: the sudden transfer of a $5 million property with zero payment attached. Normally, that would trigger a manual review, a human investigator, which would uncover the forged deed. The loan would be rejected. Andre would walk away embarrassed, but safe. And that wasn't what I wanted. Let me ask you something. If someone stole your home, would you stop them immediately, or would you let them go far enough to destroy themselves? Because what I did next shocked even my lawyer. I opened the document Andre had uploaded. The forged quitclaim deed appeared on my screen. My signature looked terrible. The pen strokes were wrong. And of course, the ink was black. I hovered my mouse over the system override panel. One click could freeze the application. Another could trigger a fraud investigation. Instead, I did something else. I lowered the risk flag, marked the transfer as verified, disabled the automatic fraud alert, and then I approved the application. My finger paused for half a second above the green confirmation button. Once this went through, the bank would release $4 million. Real money, federal money, stolen money. I clicked. The screen refreshed. Status changed. Approved. Funding scheduled within 48 hours. I closed the window and leaned back in my seat because Andre Carter had just done something spectacularly stupid. He believed he had stolen my house. What he actually did was inherit something attached to it, something he never bothered to check. You see, when I bought that Malibu estate, I didn't purchase it personally. I bought it through an offshore holding entity, a structure called Horizon Management Trust. And buried inside the property records was something Andre would never notice unless he ran a full title audit. A federal tax lien. $3.5 million. Completely harmless inside the trust structure I built. But the moment the property transferred to a private individual, that lien became their problem. Andre had just legally inherited it, which meant something very interesting was about to happen. Because now he had two things: $4 million from a bank and $3.5 million owed to the federal government. And the IRS absolutely loves situations like that. I closed the laptop. My phone buzzed. A message from Naomi, my attorney. 3 words. "Are we green?" I typed back. Green across the board. Wire scheduled. Let them spend it. I started the car. Rain still pouring down the windshield. Andre was still in my house celebrating. Rachel would probably join him soon. My parents would brag about their brilliant plan. But here's something I want you to think about. Have you ever noticed how greedy people always celebrate too early? Because the next 4 days were going to be the happiest days of Andre's life. He just didn't realize they were also the last days of his freedom. And the first thing he bought with that stolen $4 million was a car that the federal government would personally come to take back. But that wasn't the moment everything exploded. The real explosion would happen somewhere far worse, in a Beverly Hills law office, where my entire family was about to make one more catastrophic mistake. And this time, they were going to do it on paper. 3 days later, on Thursday morning at exactly 10:02 a.m., I walked into a law office in Beverly Hills, where my entire family believed they were about to finish destroying me. Instead, they were about to lock themselves into a crime they could never escape. If you've ever been manipulated by family, you probably recognize the next move they always make. After the theft comes the peace offer, the fake olive branch, the moment they pretend to reconcile, but only if you surrender everything. That's exactly what Rachel tried to do. The call came the day before. I was working inside a luxury hotel suite in downtown Los Angeles, monitoring my surveillance feed from the Malibu house. Andre and Rachel had been living like royalty for 3 days. Interior decorators were inside my living room replacing my furniture. Rachel had already ordered a $32,000 velvet sectional. Andre spent hours pacing the kitchen, bragging on the phone about liquidity. Then my phone rang. Rachel. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Hello, Rachel." Her voice came through shaky and emotional. "Claire, thank God you picked up." I stared at the camera feed. Rachel was standing inside my kitchen, drinking champagne. "I've been so worried about you," she continued. "Worried enough to throw my grandmother's ashes onto the lawn?" She sighed. "You're twisting everything." "Am I?" "You had a breakdown," she insisted. "Mom and Dad were scared. Andre and I stepped in to protect your assets." Protect. That word again. "Anyway," she said quickly, changing tone, "we want to make peace." I leaned back in my chair. Peace. "Yes," Rachel continued. "Andre spoke to our attorney. We think the best way forward is a financial settlement." I muted the phone for 1 second and laughed. A financial settlement. That meant the loan had cleared. Andre had the money. $4 million. Rachel came back on the line. "We're meeting tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Andre's lawyer's office in Beverly Hills." "And what exactly is the settlement?" "You'll see when you arrive." Then she added something that told me everything I needed to know. "Mom and Dad will be there too." Of course they would, because in toxic families, pressure always comes as a group. "All right," I said quietly. "I'll come." "Good," Rachel said quickly. "Just sign the paperwork and we can move forward like adults." Like adults. I hung up. Then I called Naomi. My lawyer answered instantly. "They took the bait again," I told her. "The loan cleared?" "Yes. And now they want her to sign a release of liability," Naomi said immediately. "Exactly. Because Andre's attorney had probably realized something. A forged quitclaim deed could still be challenged in civil court. But if I signed a release, the fraud would be legitimized, which meant Andre's lawyer was trying to clean up the crime after it happened." "Go to the meeting," Naomi said. "Alone?" "Yes. Why?" "Because criminals always relax when they think they've already won." The next morning, I dressed intentionally plain. Black slacks, beige sweater, minimal makeup, no jewelry. I needed them to see exactly what they expected. A defeated woman. When I arrived at the Beverly Hills office, the receptionist barely looked up. "Conference room B," she said. The glass door opened into a long room with a polished mahogany table. Everyone was already there. Rachel, Andre, my parents, and Andre's attorney. The seating arrangement was deliberate. Rachel sat next to Andre, my parents sat across from them. An empty chair waited at the far end. For me, isolating me physically from the rest of them. Andre smiled when I walked in. The kind of smile people use when they believe they're holding all the power. "Claire," he said smoothly, "take a seat." I sat down quietly. Andre began pacing behind his lawyer like he was presenting to investors. "I know you're upset about the house," he said. Upset? Like someone had scratched my car. "But you need to understand something about wealth creation. Here's something interesting. Arrogant people love explaining things they barely understand. You were sitting on $5 million of dead equity," Andre continued. "You're an accountant, Claire. You understand numbers, but you don't understand leverage." Leverage. He loved that word. "I turned that asset into liquidity," he continued proudly. "With one refinance, I unlocked $4 million in capital." I didn't say anything, but internally, I was fascinated, because Andre truly believed what he was saying. Rachel leaned forward. "Claire, Andre is building something bigger than you realize." Andre's attorney finally slid a thick document across the table. "This is a global release agreement," he said flatly. "Sign it and the matter is permanently resolved." I looked down at the stack of pages. "This document states you acknowledge the property transfer was voluntary," he continued. "You waive all civil claims and agree not to pursue criminal complaints." Rachel smiled sweetly. "See? Easy." "And what do I get in return?" I asked quietly. Andre snapped his fingers. The lawyer opened a leather folder. Andre slid something across the table toward me. A cashier's check. I looked down at the amount. $50,000. For a $5 million house. 1%. My father leaned back in his chair. You should be grateful. Grateful, Rachel added softly. This will help you get a small apartment. Andre smirked. Consider it a fresh start. Fresh start. Using stolen money. Let me ask you something. What would you do in that moment? Would you scream? Would you flip the table? Or would you do exactly what I did? I started crying. Real tears. 30 years of resentment made it easy. I'm just tired, I said softly. I never wanted to fight my family. Rachel reached across the table. There it is, she said gently. Claire's finally coming back to us. My mother nodded. You're not stable enough to manage wealth, she said. This is better for everyone. Andre handed me a pen. Sign the papers. My hand trembled. The room was silent. Everyone watched, waiting, believing. And then I signed. Every page, every initial. Andre's lawyer grabbed the document immediately. He reviewed the signatures, stamped it. It's done. Andre leaned back, laughing. See? I told you she'd come around. He picked up the check and flicked it toward me. Take your $50,000 and move on. Rachel smiled. We're actually hosting a housewarming party this weekend. My house. Our investors will be there, Andre continued. Big people. You're invited, Rachel added. Then she tilted her head. Although honestly, Claire, you probably can't afford the lifestyle anymore. The room erupted with quiet laughter. My father stood up. Glad we handled this like adults. I picked up the check slowly, slipped it into my purse. Then I stood. Thank you, I said softly. Andre smiled wider. See? No hard feelings. I walked toward the door. Behind me, I could hear Rachel whisper to my mother. She was always weak. But when the elevator doors closed downstairs, my tears stopped instantly. Naomi was waiting in the parking garage inside a black sedan. How did it go? She asked. I handed her the check. They offered me 1%. Naomi whistled. Bold. They also made me sign a global release. Naomi smiled slowly. Perfect. Why? Because the wire cleared this morning. She turned her tablet toward me. The screen showed a bank transaction. $4 million. Completed. Andre's account. And now, Naomi said calmly, the crime is irreversible. I looked at the screen. Andre believed he had won, but by forcing me to sign those papers, he had unknowingly completed the trap, because the next time I saw my family wouldn't be in a lawyer's office. It would be at a party, in Malibu, at the house they thought they owned, with more than 100 guests watching and federal agents waiting outside the gate. 4 days before the housewarming party, my brother-in-law, Andre Carter, did something that every financial criminal eventually does. He started bragging. And bragging is one of the easiest ways to build a federal case. Let me ask you something. If you suddenly had $4 million appear in your bank account overnight, what would you do first? Would you hide it? Would you move it somewhere safe? Or would you do what Andre did and start spending it like a lottery winner who forgot cameras exist? Because by Monday morning, Andre had already made his first mistake. Actually, his first public mistake. I was back in my hotel suite downtown. 2 monitors running, laptop open, coffee going cold beside me. The surveillance feed from my Malibu house played silently on the screen. Andre was pacing around my kitchen island, talking loudly on his phone. Rachel was in the background directing 2 interior designers. They were replacing nearly every piece of furniture in the house. My furniture. Then my phone buzzed. A text message from Rachel. I opened it. The photo showed a bright orange Hermes Birkin bag sitting proudly on the marble countertop. Retail therapy, the message read. Andre loves spoiling his family. Hope your apartment hunt is going well. Remember to check for mold. I stared at the photo for a moment. Then I downloaded it, saved it, and uploaded it into a folder labeled Evidence. Because the metadata told me something important. Timestamp. GPS coordinates. Inside my house. Purchased less than 24 hours after the loan cleared. That meant something interesting legally. Andre wasn't using the loan for business. He was using it for personal luxury spending, which the IRS absolutely loves. I typed a short message to Naomi. "Spending begins." She replied instantly. "Good. Let them dig." Tuesday morning brought the second mistake. Andre went live on Instagram. Now I want you to picture this scene. A luxury car dealership in Beverly Hills. Bright white showroom floors. 20 vehicles worth more than most people's homes. And Andre standing beside a matte black Lamborghini Urus. He was wearing a new designer suit, tag still visible on the sleeve. The camera panned across the car. Andre grinned at the phone. "Generational wealth moves only," he said. "Some people sit on debt equity. Some people turn it into liquidity." He actually winked. "I just leveraged $5 million into 4. The salesman beside him laughed nervously. Andre slapped the hood of the Lamborghini. "This is what happens when you know how money works." He bought it. $260,000. Paid with the loan funds. I downloaded the entire live stream, saved it, forwarded it to Naomi. She called me 5 minutes later. "I hope he keeps talking." "He will." "Why are you so sure?" "Because Andre's entire personality revolves around proving he's smarter than everyone else." That afternoon, the family group chat exploded. Rachel started posting photos of renovation work inside the house. Workers tearing out cabinets, replacing my furniture. My mother responded with heart emojis. "Finally turning that cold place into a real family home," she wrote. My father added a message. "Andre is exactly the financial leader this family needed." Financial leader. The irony was breathtaking. Every message, every photo, every timestamp, all of it went into the evidence folder. Because when prosecutors build white-collar cases, they love something called narrative proof, a timeline. And Andre was writing the timeline himself. Wednesday evening brought mistake number 3. Rachel texted me again. Another photo. This time, it was a Rolex watch box sitting on the same marble island. "Andre believes in investing in time," she wrote. The receipt underneath showed $80,000. 2 watches, one for him, one for her, purchased on Rodeo Drive. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the growing evidence folder. Car, luxury bags, jewelry, furniture, all purchased with funds from a loan backed by a fraudulent property transfer. That's called money laundering. By Thursday afternoon, the total spending reached nearly $500,000, which meant something very interesting. Andre hadn't paid a single creditor, not one. He hadn't stabilized his business. He hadn't invested in real estate. He hadn't paid taxes. He had simply burned through stolen money, trying to prove he was wealthy. And that's when the final invitation arrived. A thick cream envelope delivered to my hotel door. The return address was my Malibu house. I opened it slowly. Gold foil lettering. Expensive cardstock. Housewarming gala, Saturday night. Over 100 guests expected. Champagne, live music, private chef. At the bottom of the invitation, Rachel had written a personal note. "Claire, we're having over 100 guests celebrate our new beginning. Such a shame you decided to isolate yourself. Wish you could afford to be here. Love, Rachel." I read the line twice. Wish you could afford to be here. My phone rang. Naomi again. "You got the invitation?" "Yes." "Perfect. Why?" "Because the FBI will be there." I smiled slowly. "How many agents?" "Enough." Then she said something that made me laugh. Apparently, Andre invited investors. Of course he did. Because Andre didn't just want a party. He wanted an audience. The kind of audience that would admire him, believe him, fund him. Which meant Saturday night wouldn't just be a family event. It would be a public stage. And if you've ever watched someone arrogant collapse in front of a crowd, you know something important. Public humiliation hits harder than prison. But the best part wasn't the party. The best part was what happened Friday morning. Because at exactly 9:17 a.m., Andre tried to buy something with one of his credit cards, and the transaction declined. That was the moment the federal freeze began. But Andre didn't know that yet. And when he found out, it wouldn't happen quietly. It would happen in front of every single guest at his housewarming party, including my entire family. And the moment he checked his phone, everything would collapse. But the real explosion wouldn't come from Andre. It would come from the sound of 3 federal vehicles pulling into my driveway, and a voice announcing something no one at that party was ready to hear. Andre Carter, you are under arrest. Friday morning began quietly, too quietly. At exactly 9:17 a.m., while my brother-in-law Andre Carter was preparing for his big Malibu housewarming party, something invisible happened that would destroy him. The federal government froze every dollar he had. But Andre didn't know that yet. And what happened next was one of the most fascinating things I've ever watched as a forensic accountant. Because people rarely notice the exact moment their lives collapse. The morning started normally. My surveillance feed showed Andre walking around my living room, talking loudly on his phone. He was wearing a silk robe. Rachel was sitting at the kitchen island, scrolling through party decorations on her laptop. The house was full of event planners, caterers, florists. At least 15 people were inside my property, preparing for the event scheduled the next evening. Andre hung up his phone and opened his banking app. Then something strange happened. He frowned, refreshed the screen, refreshed it again. Then he closed the app and opened it a second time. I leaned forward in my chair because I knew exactly what he was seeing. Frozen federal order. Every account. Every card, every dollar. Andre stood still for a moment, staring at the screen. Then he laughed. Actually, laughed. Bank glitch, he muttered. Rachel looked up. What? App's acting weird, he said casually. He tried the credit card again. Declined. He tried another one. Declined. His smile faded slightly. Probably fraud protection, he said. Rachel shrugged. Call the bank later. Then something happened that told me Andre still didn't understand the scale of the problem. He ignored it. Completely. He tossed his phone on the counter and continued planning the party. That's the strange thing about arrogance. People assume problems will resolve themselves, especially when they've spent their whole lives talking their way out of consequences. I took a sip of coffee, then called Naomi. Did the freeze go through? Yes, she said. All accounts? All of them. So he's officially broke. For the moment. And the arrest warrants? Being finalized today. That meant one thing. Saturday night was confirmed. But before the big finale came something even more interesting. Friday afternoon, Andre tried to pay the catering company. I watched it happen on camera. The event manager stood at the kitchen island holding an iPad. Just need to finalize the payment, she said politely. Andre handed over his card. She ran it. Declined. She frowned. Sometimes terminals glitch. Andre forced a laugh. Run it again. Declined. He tried another card. Declined. Rachel's smile started fading. Andre's jaw tightened. Let me call the bank. He stepped outside. The call lasted 12 minutes. When he came back inside, his face was pale. Rachel immediately noticed. What's wrong? Nothing, he said quickly. But Rachel knew him too well. Andre, it's probably a fraud alert. Then fix it. I will. The event manager cleared her throat. We do require payment before the event begins tomorrow. Andre nodded quickly. You'll have it. She left. Rachel crossed her arms. What did the bank say? They're reviewing something. What? Just compliance. Rachel's voice rose. Compliance for what? Andre snapped. Relax. The room went silent. Even through the surveillance feed, I could feel the tension. Rachel lowered her voice. This party is tomorrow. I know. You invited investors. I know. You invited my parents. Andre rubbed his temples. I said I'll fix it. Rachel stared at him. Then something interesting happened. She asked a question that made Andre visibly uncomfortable. Is this about Claire? Andre froze. What? The house. The loan. Rachel stepped closer. Did she do something? Andre shook his head too quickly. No. Then why are your accounts frozen? I told you, it's compliance. Rachel didn't look convinced. But Andre changed the subject. Go check the guest list. And that was the end of the conversation. But here's something I want you to think about. If you suddenly discovered every bank account you owned had been frozen, would you still throw a party for 100 people the next day? Andre did. Because Andre believed the system worked the way it always had. Someone makes a call, a banker fixes it, money moves again. He had no idea he was dealing with federal authorities now. And federal freezes don't get fixed. They get enforced. By Friday evening, the party preparations were almost complete. The backyard looked like a luxury wedding venue. White tents, crystal lighting, a string quartet, a champagne tower taller than Rachel. Andre stood outside with his phone making call after call. None of them worked. But he kept smiling in front of the staff, pretending everything was under control. Rachel, on the other hand, was starting to panic. At one point, she said something that made me pause the video. What if Claire sues us? Andre laughed. She signed the release. What if she talks to the police? Andre shook his head. She can't. Why? Because legally she admitted the transfer. Rachel finally relaxed a little. They both believed the same thing. The paperwork protected them. But what Andre didn't understand was this. Civil paperwork means nothing when federal crimes are involved. That night, I received a message from Agent Harrison. 3 words. Warrants approved. The plan was simple. Saturday night, during the party, maximum witnesses, maximum documentation. Andre Carter would be arrested publicly. But that wasn't the part I was most excited about. The part I couldn't wait to see was the exact moment Andre realized the money was gone. Because that moment was coming very soon. It would happen at 8:14 p.m. in front of 100 guests, right after I stepped onto the stage and asked him one simple question. Andre, how much money is actually left in your account right now? Saturday morning arrived with the kind of flawless California sunlight real estate agents love to advertise. The sky over Malibu was perfectly blue, the ocean was calm, and my family was preparing to celebrate a house they had stolen. Meanwhile, the federal government had already scheduled their arrest. But here's something strange about revenge. The moment before everything collapses is often the quietest. And that Saturday morning was silent, in a way that felt almost unreal. I was sitting on the balcony of my hotel suite, overlooking downtown Los Angeles. Coffee in one hand, laptop open in front of me. The surveillance feed from my Malibu home filled the screen. Andre was already awake. He stood on the back patio wearing sunglasses and a white linen shirt, talking loudly on his phone while pacing beside the pool. Rachel sat at the outdoor table, reviewing a printed guest list. They both looked confident, relaxed, like people about to host the most important event of their lives. Let me ask you something. Have you ever watched someone walk confidently toward a disaster they couldn't see? Because that's exactly what I was watching. Andre hung up his phone and walked back inside the house. The catering trucks started arriving around 10 a.m., one after another. By noon, the entire property looked like a luxury event venue. Large white tents were installed across the lawn. Crystal chandeliers hung from metal frames. Rows of tables were arranged beside the pool. I recognized the catering company. They normally handled celebrity weddings, which meant Andre had spent a fortune. Or at least, he thought he had. Rachel walked through the house giving instructions to the staff. Those roses go by the bar. No, the champagne tower goes near the stairs. Andre, the DJ needs to test the speakers. Andre nodded confidently. Whatever you need. He had stopped checking his banking app, I noticed that, which told me something important. He believed the freeze had been resolved, or he believed it would be resolved before the party started. Arrogant people often operate on belief instead of facts. Around 1 p.m., my phone buzzed, a secure call, Agent Harrison. Everything in place? He asked. Yes, we'll arrive before 8. How many agents? Enough to secure the property. Where will you be? Inside. I smiled slightly. You're attending the party? Yes. And the IRS? Already there. I leaned back in my chair. That meant the trap was fully armed. But Harrison had one more question. Are you sure you want to be the one who confronts him first? Yes. You understand the risk? I do. Why not let us arrest him immediately? Because that wasn't the point. The point wasn't just prison. The point was truth. They've spent 30 years rewriting reality, I said. They need to hear it publicly. Harrison was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised me. You're colder than most prosecutors I work with. Occupational hazard. We ended the call. I closed my laptop and finally stood up. It was time to get ready. The dress was hanging on the closet door. Deep crimson silk. Simple, elegant, but impossible to ignore. Because if you're going to walk into a battlefield, you should look like someone who came to win. I dressed slowly. Hair pulled back, minimal jewelry, red lipstick. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the exhausted accountant my family believed they had crushed. I saw someone completely finished with pretending. Before leaving the hotel, I opened the safe. Inside was my grandmother's urn. The same urn Rachel had tossed into a cardboard box on my lawn. I held it for a moment. My grandmother had been the only person in my family who ever believed in me. She used to say something when I was little. Claire, numbers tell the truth people try to hide. I whispered quietly to the urn. They're about to learn that lesson. Then I placed it back inside the safe. Because tonight wasn't about grief. Tonight was about ending something. The drive to Malibu took 40 minutes. As the car turned onto my street, I could already see the lights. The entire property was glowing. Luxury cars lined both sides of the road. Valets moved quickly between vehicles. Guests in designer clothing walked up the long driveway laughing. More than 100 people had arrived already. Investors, friends, extended family. Exactly the audience Andre wanted. The car stopped at the gate. The valet opened my door. For a moment, he hesitated, probably confused about why someone dressed like me was arriving alone. I stepped out. Thank you, I said calmly. Then I walked up the driveway. The music was already playing. A live string quartet. Champagne glasses clinking. People laughing. The house looked completely different. Rachel had replaced nearly everything. But it was still my house, my floors, my walls, my view of the ocean. And soon, it would become the place where their entire illusion collapsed. I stepped through the front door. Nobody stopped me. Most of the guests didn't even notice. They were busy networking, drinking, talking about investments. But eventually, someone saw me. Then another. Then another. The whispers started spreading across the room like ripples in water. Isn't that Claire? I thought she moved out. What is she doing here? The music faltered slightly. People began turning. And then Rachel saw me. She was standing beside the champagne tower, wearing a white dress that probably cost more than my first car. Her face drained of color instantly. Andre followed her gaze. And the moment he saw me standing in the doorway, something changed in his expression. Not fear, not yet, but confusion. Because he believed I had already surrendered. He walked toward me slowly. The crowd parted as he approached. Claire, he said, what are you doing here? I smiled. I came to congratulate you. Rachel hurried over. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. This is a private event. I reached into my clutch, pulled out the invitation. The gold one she sent. You invited me. Rachel's face turned red. Andre looked irritated. This isn't the time for drama. You're right, I said calmly. It's time for honesty. Then I turned and walked past them, straight toward the DJ platform near the pool, because the next part needed a microphone. The DJ looked confused as I stepped onto the platform, but he didn't stop me. I picked up the wireless microphone, tapped it twice. The speakers echoed across the entire backyard. The music stopped. Every guest turned, and suddenly, 100 people were staring directly at me. I smiled. "Good evening, everyone." The crowd fell completely silent. Before the party continues, I'd like to congratulate tonight's hosts. Andre froze. Rachel looked panicked, because they both knew something was wrong now. Very wrong. But they still didn't understand what was about to happen, and they definitely didn't notice the two quiet guests standing near the back of the crowd. One of them was an FBI agent. The other worked for the IRS. Both of them were waiting for my signal, and I was about to give it. But first, Andre was going to answer one question, in front of everyone. A question that would destroy him faster than any arrest warrant ever could. "Andre, how much money do you actually have left right now?" At exactly 8:14 p.m., I standing under the string lights of my own backyard, I asked my brother-in-law a question that no one at that party was prepared to hear. "Andre, how much money do you actually have left right now?" For a moment, the entire yard went silent. More than 100 guests stood around the pool, holding champagne glasses and staring at us. Some of them recognized me, most of them didn't. But everyone could tell something had just shifted. Andre forced a laugh. The kind of laugh people use when they're trying to stay in control of a situation they don't understand. "Claire," he said, walking toward the stage, "you've had enough attention for one night." Rachel stepped beside him. "Give me the microphone." I took one small step back. "No." Her voice dropped into a sharp whisper. "You're embarrassing yourself." "Am I?" Andre raised his hands like a calm mediator. "Look," he said to the crowd, "my sister-in-law has been going through a difficult time." There it was. The narrative. Mental breakdown. Family intervention. Concerned relatives. He smiled at the guests. "We've been trying to help her get treatment." A few people in the crowd nodded sympathetically. Andre looked relieved. But I raised the microphone again. "Then this should be easy to answer." The silence returned. "Andre," I repeated, "how much money is in your account right now?" Andre's jaw tightened. "That's none of your business." The crowd shifted slightly. Now people were curious. Rachel stepped forward again. "Give me the microphone." She tried to grab it. I moved the microphone away from her hand without even looking at her. Then I said something that changed the entire mood of the party. "You might want to check your phone." Andre frowned. "What?" "Your bank account." His confidence flickered, just slightly. "I already did earlier today." "Then check again." He didn't move. The guests were watching. Investors, business contacts, friends. People Andre desperately wanted to impress, so he couldn't refuse. Slowly, he reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. The glow of the screen reflected on his face as he opened his banking app. Then something strange happened. He froze. The color drained from his face. He refreshed the screen. Once, twice, 3 times. The crowd noticed. Rachel noticed. "What is it?" she whispered. Andre didn't answer. He opened another banking app. Same result. Then another. His breathing became uneven. Rachel grabbed his arm. "Andre." He turned the phone toward her. Rachel looked down and screamed. A sharp, high scream that echoed across the entire yard. "No!" her voice cracked. "This isn't possible." I leaned casually against the DJ table because I already knew what they were seeing. Every account frozen, every balance inaccessible, every credit line suspended. The federal government had officially taken control. Andre shook his head violently. "This is a mistake." He looked up at me. "You did this." "I didn't do anything." "You called the bank." "No." "You hacked something." "No." "Then what is this?" Now everyone was watching closely. The investors, the neighbors, even the waiters. And that's when I said the sentence that changed everything. "It's called a federal asset freeze." The words spread through the crowd like electricity. Someone near the bar whispered, "Federal?" Andre laughed again, but the laugh sounded different this time. Desperate. You're bluffing. Am I? Rachel's voice trembled. What does that mean? It means, I said calmly, the IRS and the FBI are now involved. The reaction was immediate. Guests started whispering. A man near the pool quietly set down his champagne glass. Another guest took 2 steps backward. Andre's face turned red. You're insane. Am I? Yes. Then explain something. He glared at me. What? How did you get $4 million from a New York bank using a forged property deed? Gasps spread through the yard. Andre's investors were no longer smiling. Rachel shook her head. You signed that transfer. No. Yes, you did. No. Andre raised his voice. We have notarized documents. Yes, I said. You do. Rachel crossed her arms. So you admit it? I smiled. Of course you have a deed. Andre looked relieved. Rachel looked smug again. But then I continued. Andre, do you know what a quitclaim deed transfers?
Yes, a property. No.
I lifted the microphone closer. It transfers the property and every debt attached to it. The silence that followed felt heavier than the ocean air. Andre blinked.
What?
Every lien. Every investor in the crowd understood immediately. One man actually whispered, "Oh no." Rachel looked confused. What lien? I tilted my head slightly. The $3.5 million federal tax lien attached to this property. Rachel stared at me. You're lying. Am I? Andre's face slowly changed, because something in his memory clicked. Something he had ignored during the refinance process. The title search he never completed. You didn't check the property records, I said softly. You were too busy celebrating. Andre shook his head. That's impossible. Is it? Yes. Then call your bank. He opened the app again. The frozen message was still there. Rachel grabbed his arm. Andre, what is she talking about? He didn't answer, because now he understood. He had borrowed $4 million against a property that already owed $3.5 million to the government, which meant something very simple. The IRS had priority. Every dollar he borrowed now belonged to them. The whispers around the party were getting louder. Investors were quietly stepping away. Some guests were already heading toward the exit. Andre looked at me again. You set this up. No. You planned this. No. You trapped me. I shook my head. You trapped yourself. Rachel grabbed my arm. You ruined us. I looked down at her hand, then back at her face. No. You did that when you forged my signature. She let go immediately. The crowd was dissolving now, people leaving quickly, investors disappearing into the night. Andre stood frozen in the center of the yard, still holding his phone, still staring at the frozen accounts. But the worst part hadn't happened yet. Because just then, a loud diesel engine roared at the front gate. The sound echoed down the driveway, and a tow truck pulled into the property, dragging something up the ramp. Andre's brand new Lamborghini. And the driver stepped out holding a clipboard. He looked directly at Andre. Federal asset seizure, he said. Vehicles being repossessed. Andre didn't move. Rachel didn't breathe. And the party was officially over. But the real nightmare was about to arrive. Because the tow truck wasn't the only vehicle coming down the driveway. 3 black SUVs had just turned onto the street, and inside them were the agents waiting to arrest my entire family. The moment Andre's Lamborghini started sliding up the steel ramp of the tow truck, the illusion of wealth that my family had spent years building collapsed in front of everyone. The metal chains tightened, the winch whined, and the matte black Lamborghini Urus, the same car Andre had proudly shown off on Instagram 4 days earlier, slowly lifted off the driveway like a trophy being taken back. Andre stood frozen. Rachel grabbed his arm. Do something. The tow truck driver didn't even look at them. He checked the paperwork on his clipboard and said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Federal asset seizure, ordered this afternoon. Andre finally snapped out of his shock. You can't take that car. The driver shrugged. Not my decision. I paid cash. The driver raised an eyebrow. Yeah, that's the problem. Rachel stepped forward. This is harassment. The driver pointed to the paperwork. Funds linked to federal tax liability. Vehicle belongs to the government now. The crowd of guests had completely changed. 10 minutes earlier, they had been sipping champagne and discussing investment opportunities. Now they were watching a financial disaster unfold. People started backing away. Some pulled out their phones. Andre looked around at the crowd, at the investors he had invited, at the friends he had bragged to, at the family members who had believed him. The Lamborghini reached the top of the ramp. The chains locked. The tow truck driver climbed back into the cab. Andre ran forward. You can't just leave! The driver started the engine. Talk to the IRS! The truck rolled down the driveway, and Andre stood there, watching $260,000 disappear down the street. Rachel turned toward me. You did this. No. Yes, you did. No. Then why is this happening? Before I could answer, a deep voice spoke from behind the crowd. Because he committed federal fraud. The guests turned. 2 people stepped forward from the back of the yard. A man in a dark suit, a woman in an evening dress. Both had been standing quietly among the guests the entire night. The man reached inside his jacket and pulled out a badge. The gold emblem reflected the patio lights. Special Agent David Harrison. The woman beside him held up her own credentials. Internal Revenue Service. The reaction from the remaining guests was immediate. People moved away from Andre like he was contagious. Rachel's voice shook. This is ridiculous. Agent Harrison stepped closer. No, ma'am. This is procedure. Andre finally spoke. You can't arrest someone at a private party. Harrison tilted his head slightly. You're correct. Andre looked relieved for half a second. Then Harrison continued. That's why we waited until the crime was finished. The yard went silent again. Andre blinked. What crime? Harrison nodded toward my house. You transmitted a forged property deed to a federally insured bank in New York. Andre shook his head. That's not illegal. It is when the signature is forged. Rachel stepped forward. She signed it. Harrison didn't even look at her. We've already had the document examined. Rachel's confidence cracked. What? Harrison looked directly at Andre. Andre Carter. Andre didn't respond. Harrison's voice became firm. Stand up straight and place your hands behind your back. Andre stared at him. You're joking. No, you can't prove anything. Harrison sighed. You uploaded the forged deed from the Wi-Fi network inside this house. Andre's breathing changed. You then used that document to secure $4 million through interstate wire transfer. Rachel shook her head violently. No! The IRS investigator stepped forward, which triggered federal jurisdiction. Andre looked at me, then back at the agents. You can't arrest me for a loan. No, Harrison said calmly. We're arresting you for wire fraud, bank fraud, and aggravated identity theft. The words landed like a bomb. Rachel grabbed Andre's arm. This is insane. Andre looked around at the guests again. No one was defending him. No one was speaking. Even my parents stood silently near the bar. The agents stepped closer. Andre Carter, Harrison repeated. You are under arrest. The handcuffs came out. Andre backed away. You can't do this here. Harrison nodded. We can. Andre turned toward my father. Tell them. My father looked terrified. You handled the paperwork, Rachel added quickly. Dad knows banking law. Andre pointed at him. He arranged the notary. The entire yard turned toward my father. Thomas Harrison suddenly looked much older. Harrison's eyes shifted toward him. That's interesting. My father's voice cracked. I was just helping family. Harrison nodded slowly. Then we'll discuss that as well. Rachel grabbed Andre again. "Say something." Andre didn't move. The agents stepped forward. Two of them took his arms. Andre tried to pull away. "This is a misunderstanding." The steel handcuffs snapped closed. The sound echoed across the silent yard. Andre Carter, the man who had bragged about generational wealth on Instagram, the man who had bought a Lamborghini with stolen money, the man who had thrown a 100-person party to celebrate stealing my house, now stood handcuffed in the middle of my driveway. The crowd was almost gone now. Guests were leaving quickly. Investors were disappearing into their cars. Rachel stared at the cuffs like she couldn't process what she was seeing. "This isn't over," she whispered to me. I looked at her calmly. "It is." Andre looked up at Harrison. "You're making a mistake." Harrison shook his head. "No." He nodded toward the driveway. "Your mistake was believing the bank was the only one watching." Andre's voice dropped. "What does that mean?" Harrison glanced toward the street. "Look." Andre turned. At the end of the driveway, 3 black federal SUVs had just pulled through the gates, and they weren't there just for him, because someone else at the party had also committed a crime. And that person had already confessed, out loud, in front of witnesses, just 3 days earlier, in my parents' backyard. My father. When the 3 black federal SUVs rolled slowly through the front gates of my Malibu property, the last remaining guests finally understood what kind of party they had attended. Not a celebration. A federal crime scene. The engines shut off one by one. Doors opened. More agents stepped out. Dark suits, badges, professional calm. Andre was already in handcuffs, standing beside Agent Harrison. His velvet blazer wrinkled, and his confidence completely gone. Rachel stood a few feet away, frozen, clutching the edge of a cocktail table like it was the only thing holding her upright. And then my father made the worst mistake of his life. He ran. Not far, only 3 steps. But those 3 steps told the agents everything they needed to know. 2 officers moved instantly. They intercepted him before he even reached the driveway. "Sir," one of them said firmly. My father tried to compose himself. "I'm not involved in this." Agent Harrison walked toward him slowly. "That's interesting." My father forced a shaky laugh. "My son-in-law handled the transaction." Andre lifted his head immediately. "That's not true," Rachel snapped. "Andre, shut up." But Andre was panicking now. "No," he said loudly. "He arranged the notary." The words echoed across the yard. Every remaining guest heard it. My father's face turned gray. "You idiot," he whispered. Agent Harrison glanced at Investigator Thorne from the IRS. She nodded once. Then Harrison turned back to my father. "Thomas Harrison," he said calmly. My father straightened his shoulders. "I'm a retired banking executive. I'm aware. I've done nothing illegal." Harrison tilted his head. "Earlier this week, you admitted to arranging a notary to stamp a deed your daughter never signed." My father blinked. "That was a family matter." "No," Harrison said. "That was a felony." My mother finally broke. "What is happening?" She rushed forward toward the agents. "You can't do this to our family." Harrison didn't even look at her. "Ma'am, please step back." My father raised his voice. "You have no evidence." Harrison smiled slightly. "Actually, we do." He gestured toward me. "Your daughter recorded the entire conversation." The yard fell silent again. My father turned slowly and looked directly at me. The anger in his eyes was something I had seen many times before, but tonight it was mixed with fear. "You set this up." "No," I said quietly. "You did." Rachel shook her head. "This is insane." My mother started crying. "You're destroying your own family." I didn't respond, because there was nothing left to say. Agent Harrison stepped closer to my father. "Thomas Harrison, you are being detained for conspiracy to commit bank fraud and falsifying notarized documents." My father's voice cracked. You can't arrest me. Why not? I have connections. Harrison actually laughed. I'm sure you did. Two agents moved forward. My father backed away. You don't understand how banking works. Harrison's voice turned cold. Oh, I understand perfectly. The agents grabbed my father's wrists. The handcuffs clicked shut. The second metallic snap of the night echoed across the driveway. Rachel gasped. My mother screamed. Andre closed his eyes. Because he knew. The moment the cuffs locked, everything was over. My father's voice broke. You're ruining everything. I looked at him for a long moment. You did that when you stole from your own daughter. The agents began walking Andre toward the SUV. My father was taken in the opposite direction. Two separate vehicles, two separate cases. Rachel stood between them like someone watching her entire life collapse. She looked at me. You could stop this. No. You could tell them it was a misunderstanding. No. You're still my sister. I paused, then said something I had never allowed myself to say before. No, Rachel. Her face twisted with rage. You're heartless. Maybe. You've always been jealous of me. I almost laughed. You stole my house. You didn't deserve it. There it was, the truth, the real reason. Rachel had never believed I deserved success. You were always selfish, she continued. You left us behind. I shook my head slowly. No, I just stopped paying for you. Rachel lunged toward me. One of the agents stepped between us instantly. That's enough. The final guests were gone now. The caterers had disappeared. The party lights flickered over an empty lawn. Andre was placed inside the first SUV. My father inside the second. The doors slammed shut. My mother collapsed onto a chair beside the pool. Rachel stood motionless in the driveway. The agents finished their paperwork. Then Agent Harrison walked over to me. You handled that well. Thank you. Most people would have screamed. I work with numbers. He nodded. They don't lie. No. He glanced toward Rachel. She wasn't arrested. Why not? For now, she's only a witness. Rachel looked up immediately. What does that mean? Harrison answered calmly. It means the investigation isn't finished. Rachel's face went pale, because suddenly she realized something. Andre had already started blaming people, and in federal cases, people start talking very quickly. But the night wasn't finished yet, because just as the SUVs began pulling away, my mother stood up and walked slowly toward me, tears running down her face, her voice trembling. Claire. She dropped to her knees, right there on the driveway, and grabbed the hem of my dress. Please, stop this. My mother fell to her knees on the driveway of my Malibu home, while the flashing red and blue lights of federal vehicles painted the entire scene in harsh color. For 33 years, I had never seen Susan Harrison kneel for anyone. Not for family, not for apologies, not for responsibility. But now she was clutching the hem of my dress like it was the only thing keeping her world from collapsing. Claire, she cried, her voice cracking through sobs. Please, stop this. The agents paused nearby, watching quietly. Rachel stood a few feet away, pale and shaking, while the SUVs carrying Andre and my father slowly rolled toward the gate. My mother tightened her grip on the fabric of my dress. You can still fix this, she said desperately. You can tell them it was a misunderstanding. I looked down at her hands, the same hands that had slapped me across the face 3 days earlier. You can call them back, she continued, her voice trembling. You can say Andre misunderstood the paperwork. Her breathing became frantic. Your father has a heart condition. He won't survive prison. For a moment, the only sound in the driveway was the ocean wind moving through the palm trees. Then I asked a simple question. Did you say that when you stole my college fund? My mother froze. Rachel's head snapped toward me. What? I looked directly at my mother. Did you worry about my future when Dad drained $80,000 from my education trust? Susan opened her mouth. Nothing came out. You remember that money, I continued quietly. Grandpa set it aside so I could go to college without debt. Rachel looked confused. That was family money. No, I said. It was my money. My mother tried again. That was different. How? Rachel needed help. There it was again. Rachel needed help. Rachel always needed help. I leaned slightly closer. So you stole my future to fund a wedding. My mother's voice turned defensive. You still succeeded. I succeeded because I worked 3 jobs and took out loans. Rachel shook her head. You're exaggerating. No. My mother tried a different tactic. We're still your family. That word again, family. For most of my life, it had been the chain they used to keep me quiet. But something interesting happens when people push you too far. Eventually, the word stops working. You're not my family anymore, I said calmly. Rachel gasped. You can't say that. I just did. My mother's grip tightened. You owe us. That sentence hung in the air for a long moment. Then I laughed, not loudly, just enough. Owe you? Yes, she said desperately. We raised you. You used me. Rachel stepped forward. You're being cruel. No. You're punishing us. No. You're destroying Dad. No. Rachel's voice rose. Then what do you call this? I looked around slowly. The empty lawn, the abandoned champagne glasses, the lights still glowing from the party that had collapsed. Accounting. Rachel frowned. What? I looked back at her. This is what happens when the bill finally comes due. She stared at me like she didn't understand the language, because in her world, bills had always been someone else's responsibility. My mother's voice softened again. Claire, please. She lowered her head. I'll apologize. Rachel turned in shock. Mom? I'll apologize for everything, my mother continued quickly. We'll give the house back. I shook my head. You can't. Rachel's voice cracked. Why not? Because you never owned it. My mother looked up again. You can tell the agents the transfer was legitimate. No. Rachel's face twisted with anger. You're heartless. No. You're enjoying this. No. Then why won't you help us? I reached into my clutch, pulled out the cashier's check Andre had given me in the lawyer's office. $50,000. The price they thought would buy my silence. Rachel recognized it immediately. You kept it. I held it between 2 fingers. You offered me 1% of what you stole. My mother whispered. That was generous. I stared at her, then slowly tore the check in half. The sound of the paper ripping was louder than expected. Rachel's eyes widened. My mother gasped. I dropped the pieces on the driveway. They're going to need that money for lawyers, I said calmly. Rachel's voice trembled. You ruined us. No, you destroyed our family. No, you did this. I met her eyes. You did this the moment you forged my name. Rachel looked away. My mother began crying again. The agents finished loading equipment into their vehicles. Agent Harrison approached one last time. We're clearing the scene, he said. Understood. He looked at Rachel briefly. Ma'am, we'll be in touch. Rachel swallowed. For what? Further questioning. Her face went pale again. The SUVs began pulling away, one by one. Andre, my father, gone. My mother slowly released my dress. She remained on her knees. Rachel stood beside her, both of them staring at the empty driveway. I turned and walked toward the gate. Rachel's voice followed me. Claire! I stopped but didn't turn around. You'll regret this. For a moment, I thought about answering, but then I realized something. There was nothing left to explain, so I kept walking. The black car Naomi had arranged was waiting at the curb. I opened the door, sat down, and as the driver pulled away from the house, I looked back once. Rachel and my mother were still standing in the driveway. under the lights of a party that had turned into a crime scene. But the story wasn't over yet, because the next morning, the entire country would learn what my family had done, and Rachel would make one final decision. A decision that would determine whether she joined Andre in prison or told the truth about everything. The morning after the arrests, I woke up before sunrise in a hotel room that suddenly felt quieter than any place I had ever slept. No phone calls, no accusations, no family drama, just silence. And if you've ever spent your entire life carrying the weight of toxic people, you'll understand something strange about that kind of silence. At first it feels unfamiliar. Then it feels peaceful. I sat on the balcony watching the sun rise over Los Angeles with a cup of black coffee in my hands. My phone buzzed exactly once. Naomi. "News is out," she said when I answered. "What kind of news?" "The kind that ruins reputations permanently." I opened my laptop. The first headline appeared immediately. Malibu real estate fraud investigation leads to federal arrests. Below it were the details. Andre Carter charged with federal wire fraud, bank fraud, and aggravated identity theft. Thomas Harrison charged with conspiracy and falsifying notarized documents. $4 million frozen. Luxury assets seized. Property under investigation. The article didn't mention my name, which was exactly how I wanted it. "Any bail?" I asked Naomi. "For Andre?" "No. Why?" "He tried to wire money offshore yesterday afternoon." I laughed quietly. Of course he did. The judge considered him a flight risk. And my father? He posted bail using the Calabasas house. But he lost something much worse. What? His pension. That part made me pause. Thomas Harrison had built his entire identity around being a senior banking executive. The IRS had already begun proceedings to seize his retirement benefits. 40 years of financial reputation gone in a single weekend. "Rachel?" I asked. Naomi hesitated. "She hasn't been charged yet." "Why?" "She's cooperating." That didn't surprise me. Rachel had always survived by aligning herself with whoever held the power. And right now, that wasn't Andre. "She's talking to investigators," Naomi continued. "About what?" "Everything." I closed the laptop. That was the final layer of the truth. In federal cases, someone always talks, and Rachel had chosen survival. I checked out of the hotel that afternoon. Then I drove back to Malibu. The house looked different in daylight. Quieter, cleaner, almost like the chaos from the previous night had never happened. But inside, it still felt contaminated. Rachel's velvet furniture was still sitting in the living room. Half-installed cabinets still hung in the kitchen. The place smelled like perfume and expensive champagne. I stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then I called a cleaning company. Not a regular one, the kind that handles deep property restoration. 2 hours later, a convoy of white vans arrived. Workers in protective suits carried equipment inside: industrial cleaners, fumigation systems, chemical sprayers. The entire house would be sealed under a massive tent overnight. Every surface disinfected. Every trace of my family removed. While they worked, I walked down to the beach. The Pacific was calm, gray waves rolling slowly toward the shore. I sat on a piece of driftwood and watched the water. For the first time in years, my mind felt completely clear. No guilt, no anger, just distance. Because the truth is something most people don't want to admit. Family doesn't always mean love. Sometimes it means obligation. Sometimes it means manipulation. Sometimes it means people who believe they own pieces of your life simply because they share your blood. For 33 years, I believed I had to tolerate that, until I realized something important. Boundaries aren't cruelty. They're protection. My phone buzzed again, a text message from an unknown number. I opened it. Rachel. 3 words. You won. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed a reply. No, this isn't about winning. A few seconds passed. Her response appeared. What is it about? I looked out at the ocean again. Then I typed the only honest answer. Freedom. She didn't respond again. That was the last message I ever received from Rachel Harrison. By sunset, the fumigation tent covered the entire house like a giant white shell. The workers told me it would take 24 hours to finish the process. I stood on the lawn holding my grandmother's urn. The same urn Rachel had tossed into a cardboard box days earlier. The wind from the ocean moved gently through the grass. I whispered something my grandmother used to tell me when I was young. People eventually reveal who they are. Then I placed the urn safely back inside my bag. The house would be clean again soon. But more importantly, my life would be too. Because the greatest revenge isn't destruction, it's distance. Distance from people who only see you as something they can take from. And once you learn that lesson, everything changes. If you made it this far into the story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who believed they owned part of your life? If you have, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story meant something to you, make sure you like and subscribe. Because there are a lot more stories about people who finally stopped letting toxic families write their endings. And next time, I'll tell you about the woman who discovered her husband had secretly taken out a life insurance policy on her. 3 months before she found out, he had a second family.